Welcome to the Just Off Harbor podcast. Today we are going to talk about do you think it's the most asked question that we get?
It's definitely the one that requires a lot of prep and hand holding. So I feel like people get the most nervous about this topic and maybe feel a little handicapped by the prospect of going because of how complicated this can feel.
Well, because it also requires a cost and a commitment of knowing what you're doing. So today we want to talk about Lightning Lane Multipass, which has been formerly known as Genie Plus. You may hear us accidentally call it Genie Plus during this podcast because it's been so ingrained in our brains, but we'll try to just call it Lightning Lane Multipass to help to make it be more clear to you, and also excuse us holding our microphones in our hands today. We are attempting to have a little bit better sound. We're waiting for our boom mics to arrive. So just trying to get the best sound quality to you.
Trying to not have our hair flip into it from having it connected, and we're just so wiggly. So we're trying to be a little more proactive about our sound this time. So hopefully you can appreciate that, even though we look like this, like giants holding little microphones.
It's just a baby. Maybe we need to have pinkies out. Is that the proper way to hold it? All right. Where do we want to start?
Well, first of all, the biggest thing, I think we've been getting a lot of questions about this. Genie Plus existed up until July 24th, I think it was, of this year. Then it switched over to what they now call multi-lane or Lightning Lane Multipass. So the big thing that we get questions about is what changed? And the answer that you need to really internalize is nothing. Nothing changed.
Specifically for Disneyland.
Yes.
Disney World, they did a whole bunch of overhaul change, but Disneyland, nothing, absolutely nothing has changed except the name. If you've already bought tickets that say Genie Plus added in, it's still the same thing. It just has a new name.
Right. So that's the biggest thing to take off your panic list. That you don't have to worry that you need to change anything, fix anything, learn anything new. If you felt prepared or you've used Genie Plus previously, this is that. But for the purpose of the show, like Britton said, we'll call it Lightning Lane Multipass as much as we can. And that is moving forward what Disneyland refers to it as. The difference between Lightning Lane Multipass and Lightning Lane Single Pass is Lightning Lane Multipass encompasses all those rides that were always on Genie Plus. So basically every sort of headliner ride in the park, including, headliner as in roller coasters and things like that, but also things like Haunted Mansion, Little Mermaid, Star Tours, Buzz Lightyear, Astro Blasters, a lot of the just kind of basic rides. The only thing it really doesn't cover is Fantasyland rides, and occasional like kiddie rides, like Jesse's Critter Carousel, for instance, is not on it.
A lot of the pier rides don't count on it, except for like Toy Story Midway Mania and Incredicoaster. But all those like swings and Jumpin' Jellyfish and Golden Zephyr, all of that's not included.
Also, I was thinking of another one. What was I going to say? It'll come back to me. Oh, like Winnie the Pooh is not on it as well over in Disneyland. But I feel like pretty much everything in Disneyland other than Fantasyland and Winnie the Pooh. Oh, subs, Finding Nemo subs is not on it. I can't think of anything else, though, off the top of my head. Jungle Cruise. So there's a few.
And, like, the little Gadget Go Coaster. And, like, there's just, like, things that are not included. But all of the big things, all the things that you would typically, if there wasn't an option, you would typically plan on, like, a 30-hour-minute wait, you know? Like, kind of the longer things. The things that are a little more standard, like 20-minuters, they don't include that.
So the difference between that and then you've got single pass. Single pass is only available for a couple rides at Disneyland. That is Radiator Springs Racers and Rise of the Resistance. So those are the only two. Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway was on it for a bit, but it moved to Lightning Lane pretty quickly. We assume when Tiana's Bayou Adventure opens, it will actually probably be on a virtual queue for a while. And then it will move to probably a multi-lane or single pass offer and a standby is my guess.
It will probably have a virtual queue as well as a paid single lane.
You think initially it will do that?
I think so.
So
I'm pretty sure that's what they did.
That's true because some people were riding it twice.
And if you couldn't get the virtual queue, you do at least have the option to pay for everybody to go on it. So you can still at least have the chance to ride it if it's your only time. So I think they do have it usually.
I think you're right. So you can probably expect that one to get added to Single Pass. Those are the only 3. And in Disney World, there's more. That's a whole different world of things. So again, don't worry about that. But for the purpose of the show, I'm going to say it wrong. Lightning Lane Multi-Pass, Lightning Lane Single Pass. And we're primarily talking about Multi-Pass, which is the general, you buy it for your whole family, you schedule rides all day long, and that's what we're going to dive into is how to go about that. So hopefully that got some housekeeping out of the way and made you feel like you know what we're about to go into. And let's dive in.
So I think the first thing we want to talk about is just general expectations of what Genie Plus is. It costs about $30 per person per day, which can be kind of a spicy meatball. It's expensive.
I've literally never heard of that. Did you just like make that up? Is that a thing?
No, I've heard it that way before.
Spicy meatball. Carry on.
Apologies. For this reason, we feel like, especially if you're doing like a 5-day trip, 4-day trip, you don't need Genie Plus for every single day. Lightning Lane Multi-Pass. This is going to be a problem. When we purchase it, we try to plan to do it for 2 or 3 days of our trip and make those days quite ride heavy so that we can really get the most out of it. And then on our days we don't have Genie Plus, we will rope drop Fantasyland and we will watch a show and we'll ride the monorail and we'll do things that aren't included on Genie Plus. We'll do Animation Academy just to kind of break it up a little bit, and then maybe we'll pick to just go wait in a standby at some point. But you can really have a really good day at Disneyland without just like constantly ride hopping. So especially if you have a longer trip, don't feel like you have to buy it every day. We don't really like buying it on our tickets ahead of time. We tend to like to just pick it each day as we go and decide if it's important or not.
The only exception to that, I think, is if you have a 2-day trip, I would probably definitely just plan to purchase it with your tickets because it will prorate your price at that, or prorate's not really the right word, but it will freeze your price at that $30 amount or whatever. Because sometimes Genie Plus can be as much as $35 a day. And especially if you have a family of a handful of people, that can suddenly be $20 or $30 more money. So if you really do know, excuse me, if you do know that you're going to be using Lightning Lane for the entirety of your 2 or 3 day trip, just splurge and get it. But if you do have like a 3 to 5 day trip and you feel like there's a chance you're going to play it by ear a little bit, that's where you want to make sure you're not building it into the cost of your trip, because there's no reason to. Like Britton said, you can I was going to say strategically and strategize at the same time. You can strategically decide which days make the most sense and go a little bit more show heavy or break heavy or dining heavy on the alternative 1 or 2 days. So it is a little bit of like a preference point, but we never put it in our tickets because we do know that we like to be able to sort of decide how we feel, decide what we've already hit. Like some of it depends. Like if you have day 1, 2, and 3 of your trip and you have like really hit everything a handful of times and you're feeling really confident, maybe now it is just the things like the tiki room or, your character breakfast you have scheduled or whatever. Like you at that point you can feel comfortable saying we don't need it. And that's why if it's already built in, you're paying for it anyway. But if you have given yourself that space, you can make that call.
The other thing to consider when you're deciding about going is if you have a park hopper ticket versus a 1 park per day, your Lightning Lane value goes up significantly. So you pay the same price whether you have a 1 park or a park hopper. And if you're only stuck in 1 park, you can only do all the Lightning Lanes that are in that park. Where if you have a hopper, you can do a bunch in 1 park and then do a bunch in the other park and then maybe hop back and do more in the other park. So your availability and the value of your Lightning Lane pass goes way up when you have a park hopper. So consider that as well. If Lightning Lane is going to be important to you, maybe also consider park hopping. So if you could only do one or the other, which is another question people always ask, I can only afford Lightning Lane or park hopping. What do you say?
I think that, again, depends on the length of your trip. I think if you have a 2-day trip, don't get a hopper. Just spend 1 day in Disneyland, 1 day in DCA, get done what you can. But if you've got a 5-day trip, I still feel like I would... that's such a tough one, because I feel like on the one hand, I'd probably pick a hopper because I like the flexibility of being able to hit the rides that are most important to you. Like how you've said with your kids, sometimes they've been really frustrated on times you haven't had a hopper because they want to hop back over and hit Guardians on the last day, but your last day is a Disneyland day or whatever. So I feel like that really like paralyzes your ability to make the choices that you want to make. But also having a hopper but no Genie Plus, especially with kids, I feel like, unless it just happens to be a really low crowd day and you're blowing through everything just fine, I feel like it's just worth it. And we were just talking about this earlier today. You can take this away, but like the whole breakdown of like per ride, cost per ride, and value per ride to have Genie Plus, honestly, it's kind of the same thing I feel about people who ask if they can like pack in all their lunches. Just wait. Don't take the trip until you have a little bit of a budget for food and a little bit of a budget for Lightning Lane and a little bit of a budget for souvenirs or whatever the things, because if you rush it, you've spent almost all that money anyway, and you've had a way less valuable experience. And if you just give yourself the time to build up that, slush fund, so to speak, for Disneyland, you can get hoppers plus Lightning Lane, and you're going to want both. I don't think you can pick one or the other. I don't know what answer I would give people. And maybe some of it would depend on ages of kids, the type of riders they have, that kind of stuff. But that's tough.
Yeah, I agree. I never quite know how to answer that question. Because what it comes down to is if you pay for Genie Plus or Lightning Lane, you only have one park per day, you only get half the value. But if you pay for the park hopper and you don't have Lightning Lane, you're going back and forth, but you're not being very efficient with your day either. Right. So that's why we always say to maybe do your very best to get a park hopper ticket and then add a couple days of Lightning Lane if at all possible. Even if it's just a couple days, we tend to try to do like our first day and our last day with Lightning Lane so that everybody when you're really excited and you want to just go ride after ride after ride first day, you can do that. And then your last day, you can also hit everything that maybe you haven't got to do or you want to do again. So even if those are your only choices, I would plan a park hopper and 2 days of Lightning Lane.
I think that's a good middle of the road thing. I don't think you want to take a 5-day trip and not have Genie Plus at all. That's what it comes down to. Like no matter what, like
you'll spend your whole trip in line.
Yes. And you'll feel frustrated. And this is what we were saying earlier is if you take a $30 Genie Plus day, and it sounds like a lot because it is, but let's say, I would say on average, we probably do like maybe 10-ish Lightning Lanes pretty comfortably on a Genie Plus day. You're at $3 a ride. Would you wait $3 or pay $3 to go in the Lightning Lane on any given ride? Let's say everything was single pass. Would you say, I'll fork out $3 to not wait an hour to get on Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway? Would you say, I'll pay $3 to hop on Matterhorn and not wait in a 90-minute blazing hot line? Probably. Like you probably would. And when you break it down that way, it feels a little more bite-sized and it kind of makes a little bit more sense. It still is a tough pill to swallow when you fork out $180 for your family of 6 like we
First
do.
Thing in the morning as you enter the gate.
When you're not even really sure what the day will hold or how busy it will get or, how much stamina everyone will have. It is a bit of a gamble, but it also in some ways a motivator to like use your day wisely and not just like kind of like, I feel like the days that you and I go, even when we're like, let's not get Lightning Lane, let's just do what we want. We sit around a lot. And part of that's because we go a lot and we're on a grown-up trip where we're maybe dining more and we're getting a lot of content and our trip is not a family vacation. But I feel like the days we have Lightning Lane, we're a lot more motivated to work that in. And we still get a lot done, but we also get to get on rides. And otherwise you just kind of give up, I feel like.
So now we've convinced you and helped you to understand how much you want to use Genie Plus and when. How does it work? Not Genie Plus, Lightning Lane. When does it work? How does it work? you purchase your Lightning Lane once you scan into the park. You can't schedule it ahead of time. You'll see online people scheduling at 7 a.m. That's Disney World. Ignore that.
And
Don't
now
feel
even
you can
like
do that.
3 days in advance with the new one, Disney World has, you can pick a certain number.
It's so different. So,
Yeah.
so
Ignore
really try to pay attention to only Disneyland information because it's different. Even if you've already purchased Lightning Lane with your ticket, you cannot start scheduling Lightning Lanes until you are in the park. So scan into the park, purchase your Lightning Lane for everyone, and then we usually like to wait just a little bit before we start doing anything because first thing in the morning, everything has like less than a 10-minute wait. So if you immediately go and use your Space Mountain Lightning Lane when it has a 10-minute wait, that's fine, but you kind of wasted your Space Mountain Lightning Lane that you could just go do the 10-minute wait and then later in the day go on it again. So just be sure that you're like waiting until those wait times start to get a little longer. Otherwise, just go standby. Don't feel like you have to use it because then you can just ride multiple times that day. So take advantage of those low wait times if you're there first thing in the morning. Secondly, so the rules of Lightning Lane. You can book a Lightning Lane every 2 hours or after you've scanned into your most recent booking. So if I book Indiana Jones for 10 a.m. and it's 9 a.m., typically you would wait. The 2-hour penalty says you can't book until 11. But what I'm going to do is go scan into Indiana Jones at 10 when it's allowed, and I'm going to immediately book something else because once I've scanned in, that 2-hour penalty is gone. You don't have to go by it anymore. So then you get to do something again. So which is why you want to try to schedule stuff as soon as of a return time as possible, right? So you don't want to necessarily book something that's at 4 p.m. when it's 10 a.m. because then you have to take that 2-hour penalty. So if you have to do that, that's an option which we can talk about. But especially first thing in the morning when you're wanting to try to do several, book the nearest return time possible. Once you scan in, immediately go back onto your phone and book your next one so you aren't waiting big, long, extra amounts of time.
There are certain rides, and we have a list of these on our website that you could go look over, but there are certain rides that you want to prioritize when you're booking your Lightning Lanes throughout the day. There's some things that pretty much have an immediate return for Lightning Lane continuously. And by immediate, I mean within the half hour, pretty much through the whole day. So things like Astro Blasters, Star Tours, trying to think of really Incredicoaster, honestly. Little
Even things
Mermaid.
like Big Thunder Mountain.
Yeah, Big Thunder. Millennium Falcon. Like most of those, Pirates of the Caribbean, you can get pretty much like, you can expect that anytime you're like having a hankering for Pirates of the Caribbean, you can throw it on there and choose it within about a half an hour. So that's fine. You can use them whenever. But for us, we try to save those ones until later in the day just because there's no reason to take them at the beginning. The ones you want to do are the ones where their return times are bumping out really fast. So like Britton talked about this in our other podcast the other day, and she just used an example. This is wrong. We don't know the numbers on this, but let's say that every hour there's 100 spots on Indiana Jones. So between 9 and 10, they take 100 people. Between 10 and 11, they take another 100. Those book up really fast, right? So if you're not one of those people, then all of a sudden it's out to 4 p.m. at 10 a.m. and you haven't grabbed it. Where some other rides, they have a higher capacity. So maybe Pirates of the Caribbean takes 500 people an hour. And so those book out a lot slower. Does that make sense? Hopefully that does. But the point is, there's certain rides. Those are Indiana Jones, Space Mountain, Runaway Railway, Haunted Mansion Holiday, which isn't even on Lightning Lane right now because of its refurbishment. But are there other in Disneyland?
Not in Disneyland, but in DCA, I would say there's Guardians of the Galaxy, Runaway Railway, Midway Mania. Those are the two big ones. And then Grizzly River Run can go kind of fast if it's summer and it's hot. So if you're thinking that that's going to be important for you, that around noon when it's hot, you want to hop on, you might want to grab that by 10:30,
Yeah.
or it will be out to 4 o'clock and then maybe you don't care anymore.
Right. So in the morning, a typical morning for us, let's say, because we love Indy, for instance. So we would rope drop Indy, go right on it, not with a lightning lane. But while we're in the line for Indy, we buy our lightning lane, or unless we've already bought it before when you're waiting the ropes. But for the sake of this example, you get in the Indy lane, you're standing by, you purchase your lightning lane, and let's say Indy as a lightning lane is already out to noon. Probably wouldn't be that early, but let's say it is. You might want to grab it again because it's going to go fast. Because the reason that I say that is because you're there first thing in the morning. You have all this time to the world is your oyster. You can get on pretty much anything in Disneyland with a 10 to 20 minute wait for the first couple hours of the day. So that's a good time to take that 2-hour penalty. If there's something that's already seeming like it's going to book into the afternoon, that's the one you want to sit on first thing. So you grab Indy for noon, you take that 2-hour penalty, and while you're taking that penalty, you're walking on things. You're getting breakfast. You're meeting the characters. You're doing whatever. And that's sort of like, I don't know. I always feel like that's a good way to not waste those morning hours where you are not wanting to pick it. You're wanting to go in the standby line and not choose lightning lane. That you're already making use of one, but you're not like wasting it. Does that make sense? I don't know.
I think it makes sense. Sometimes that's not always possible because if it's not super crazy, sometimes nothing is pushed out that far. And so you really don't have much of a choice other than to just kind of wait until things are moving a little. But
it's just,
yeah,
you
I
got to
think that's
keep an eye on it.
It's something you need to be watching and being aware of. This is why phone chargers are important, portable phone chargers, and having familiarity with the app and all of that beforehand, because this will be really, really frustrating to try to figure out in the park when everybody's excited and wanting to get on rides and you're trying to figure out wait times and lightning lane and all of the things. Like, this is just my little soapbox. Like, make sure you know the app before you go to the park.
And we'll talk about that in a future episode in more detail. And actually, we're going to be in the park this coming weekend, not this weekend, next weekend. And we will be kind of trying to do a little bit more of a visual version of what we're talking about right now. We're going to sort of document our day as we're doing Genie Plus a little bit so that you can see us on our phones in real time doing the things that we're talking about here. Because sometimes people are just visual learners. It sounds really complicated. Mm-hmm. Our other sister, well, sometimes she does this all the time. She'll give us instructions to go to a place. And she'll be like, well, you go up to 200 South and then you make a right. And then you go up and you go 6 blocks and then you make a left at whatever. And my brain can't process that. But if she showed me on a map, I would be like, oh, okay, I know where I'm going. So I'm a visual learner. Some people want it all discussed like this. So we're going to do both.
So hopefully this is helpful if you're just listening. If not, if this was kind of a basic for you, but you want visual, we're planning to give that to you.
And that'll be on our YouTube in a couple weeks, probably.
Yeah. This is something that a lot of people don't realize they can do. This is kind of maybe, I wouldn't say it's like our secret, but I don't see people talk about it very much. But it's something that I feel like we've perfected over our last.
Well, and I feel like we
trips.
didn't even discover really that this was. We might have done it in a pinch here and there, but we didn't really discover this as like a viable technique until maybe the last year or so.
And this is something we now do constantly. For everything.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about, Indy. You're rope dropping Indy, and it's out to noon because everybody grabbed all the lightning lanes. You don't want to wait till noon. It's 3 hours away. You have to take a 2-hour penalty. That sucks. You want to get moving on some more of your lightning lanes. So what you're going to do is in your app, you have, and this is something we'll show visually on our other video we're going to create, but it says Indy lightning lane return time at 12 to 1 o'clock. You're going to hit, there's a button right below it. It's a blue button. It says modify. There's 2 buttons actually. One says modify and one says cancel.
Don't cancel.
Don't cancel. You're going to hit
Don't
modify.
Cancel. I don't think I said that into the mic. Don't cancel.
You're going to hit modify. It will then take you back to the main screen of all of the rides and all of the choices of available lightning lanes. You still have your Indy Lightning Lane. It didn't go anywhere. You didn't cancel it. It's still sitting there. And it's usually sitting right at the top, whatever is the one that you are holding currently. And it will show the newest return time. It'll probably still say noon or 12:30. It might even be out a little bit. So if you see it like that, you're going to go back. And then you're going to hit modify again. And it says 12. And you're going to go back. And you're going to hit modify again. It's going to still say 12. You're going to go back. You're going to hit modify again. And it's going to say 11:30. You're going to grab it. You're going to push it, click on it, say modify, swap, whatever the button.
But you got to make sure you go all the way through, because I've made this mistake once or twice where I've thought I modified, like I've selected it and I've thought that it was all said and done, but you have to actually like go through a couple more screens. Yeah. So make sure it's really there before you.
And it'll show your new return time. So 11:30. That's great. It's a whole half hour earlier, but maybe still not as soon as you want it to be. So it's good, but not great. So now you're going to go back and find your 11:30 Indy that now exists in your Lightning Lane section on your app. We're going to do this again. Modify. It says 11:30. Go back. Modify. 10:30. Grab it. You have a 10:30. Now you have saved yourself an hour and a half of wasted sitting around time, and you get to go on Indiana Jones at 10:30 instead of at noon. Because people drop stuff throughout the day. People get rid of things. They change their mind. They cancel. They modify. Someone that had a 10:30 didn't want it anymore. They changed their mind and wanted breakfast. Now it's yours. And you get to go at 10:30, and then you go and you scan in and you grab something else. And now you've completely gotten rid of that 2-hour penalty, but yet you were holding it just in case, and it didn't start over your 2-hour penalty. Like if it didn't work, if you just could never find anything, nothing changed, it always said noon or later, you just kind of give up and you go at noon. But you never messed it up to where now your time has started over.
On the contrary, if you do click cancel, that will start your time over. So if you booked something at 10 a.m. and at 11 a.m. you decide to cancel, and maybe it is because all of a sudden you met up with some friends and you're going to get some lunch and that's not going to work for you, and you decide to cancel, canceling starts it back over, and now you can't book again till 1. It's 11 and now it's 1 instead of 10 and noon. So the difference is, if your plans change, you can definitely change your plans. Just don't lose the time slot that you have booked it within. Like, and by that I mean, if you booked it at 10, keep that 10 o'clock penalty and just modify, because you don't want to have to start your whole 2-hour window back over. And hopefully that makes sense. It sounds complicated, but just never cancel, only modify. And even if you're modifying, like let's say you want to go take a break. Let's say it's 1 o'clock and you book something at 12:30 for 1:30, but you're really tired and you want to go take a break. And you're like, I guess we'll just cancel that. That's wrong. That's wrong. Book something, even if you're going to go take a break, book something that's out to 6 p.m. right now and hold that one, and then take your 2-hour penalty, like do whatever you need to, but there's always something that you can get far away.
And you also don't have to modify just to your same ride. Like if you're going back and forth and Indy's not moving, but you really want to go get on something and Matterhorn is at 10:30, go grab Matterhorn instead. But you still have you're helping that 2-hour divide. You can still go do something else, but hurry and quickly go scan into Matterhorn and then grab the noon Indy again and try to modify it again. So sometimes it's good to just like drop it and grab something else, ride that thing, and then immediately go and try and grab something that you're worried is going to be far out again. So don't feel like you're like stuck to that just because you grabbed it at one point. You can still swap around. You can pick something else. It's just the takeaway is modify, don't cancel.
Clear as mud. I hope that kind of helps. Again, this is the same thing I was just saying about the map. When someone tells you this, it feels like they're speaking in another language. When you're doing it in practice, it's like, oh, I get it.
Which is why we want to film this for you.
And we will.
We will do this weekend, next weekend.
Because it's important. So next on your list, and we kind of alluded to this, is stacking. So stacking is something that is it's kind of been turned into something that it's not on a lot of people's like Disneyland tips pages. So this is your warning. If someone is telling you it's 8 a.m., but you want a 4 o'clock Millennium Falcon, go book it. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. This is what we were saying about the whole first thing in the morning. Sometimes nothing's available to book. It's because everything has an immediate return time. And the way that things get booked out is, like I mentioned, as those time slots fill up. So it's not going to be a 4 o'clock Millennium Falcon option at 8 a.m. literally ever. It's probably not going to be a 4-hour Millennium Falcon option at 2 p.m. Hardly ever. Some of those rides are immediate returns, and the only way that you're going to be able to hold rides far out is if they're already booking far out. So this is where stacking comes in. And we try to do this with rides when we are about to go take a break because, again, you don't want to have to wait 2 hours between every hard to hit ride. Sometimes it's easier to take those 2-hour penalties at times that it's not important for you to be doing things actively. So if we are taking a long dining reservation, if we're swimming at the hotel pool, if we are, what are some other things that you do that take a long time? Gonna watch a midday parade, whatever the things that kind of stretch that time out where you're not actively needing to be on attractions, those are the times that you prioritize stacking. So for us, this is how it usually pans out. It's 1 o'clock, we're tired. We decide we're gonna go take a break. We book a lightning lane. Let's say it's Runaway Railway. We book Runaway Railway for 5 p.m. because it's out that far already, and that's something we can grab for then, and we know we'll be back in the park by then. So at 1 o'clock, we book Runaway Railway for 5. We go to the hotel. I set an alarm for 3 p.m. because that's when I can now book my next lightning lane. I hold that for 3, or set an alarm for 3, and at 3 o'clock, I get up and I book Matterhorn for 5:45 because now it's out that far. So now I've stacked these two for 5 o'clock and 5:45, and I haven't wasted any time because I'm not in the park anyway by holding those 2-hour penalties, but I'm stacking my evening so that when I go back into the park, everything's lined up. Then I set another alarm for 7. No, I was at 3 for 5. And that's about when we're getting up to get ready to go back into the park. And at that point I book a third one. And let's say that one is for Space Mountain at 8 p.m. No, that's a bad idea because I'll be in the park already. Space Mountain for 6:30 p.m. That sounds better. And then by the time we've gotten off all those rides, my 5 to 6:30 penalty window is over because now we're getting on Space Mountain at 6:30 and we book another one and your night continues. So that's the stacking situation. You're never stacking first thing in the morning. If you're stacking first thing in the morning, it just means you're wasting 2 hours between every ride. Stacking only applies at times when you're no longer actively needing those attractions currently.
Because you will always do better booking and scanning in versus taking that 2-hour penalty. If you take a 2-hour penalty all day long, the maximum amount of rides you're going to get on is like 6 or 7 rides. Where
and it's painful. It's a painful 6 and 7. And you have to be lucky enough that by the time you're booking ride number 4, it's not completely out of lightning lanes because it's already 7 p.m. at that point.
Yeah.
Like it's not practical to go about your day that way. And people that look at it that way and say, you can just stack all these up for afternoon or whatever. The only way that makes sense is if you're not going to be in the parks wanting to ride those things during that time.
And because you can't grab something at 8 a.m. for 4 p.m., that's not even a practical thing to get to do.
Right.
Because it doesn't exist.
And that's why we say if you are booking something first thing in the morning at 8 a.m., yeah, maybe it's something that's out till 11 or noon, maybe. But realistically, nothing's getting out that far until about 10 a.m. You don't start to see things really kind of move. So at 8 a.m., you're getting on standby lines and you're watching those ones that tend to creep up, like Space Mountain, like Indiana Jones. And when you feel like it's kind of getting there, that's when you pull the trigger. Not a second before. And don't be panicked that you're wasting your lightning lane at 8 a.m. because no one's wasting. I mean, panic that you're not booking things at 8 a.m. because no one's wasting their time scanning into a line at 8:10. And if they are, everyone's looking at them funny. Like, what are you doing?
Every single time we rope drop, we watch people enter the lightning lane as we enter the standby, and we enter the ride with them.
And we're like, what are you doing?
And we're like, why did you waste your Guardians of the Galaxy lightning lane for 8 a.m?
It's because they don't understand.
It's because you don't get it. And you need to get it because you want to ride Guardians twice that day, not once at 8 a.m. where you walked on with everybody else when you could have walked on.
They all walked on for free, and you just paid $4 a person to go on that.
So the only time I would ever say that that's okay is if you're leaving, like flying out at 6 p.m. or something, and you don't necessarily have a full day to do everything. And it's just kind of like, I'm just going to use it and move on and feel like I got on a little bit faster than everybody else. And maybe you do that. But also, if you're flying out at 6 p.m., maybe don't get Genie Plus for that day.
Maybe that's the day you don't pick it. Thank you for coming to her TED Talk.
Thank you.
But actually, this goes too for times when, like, let's say you've booked Monsters, Inc. for 10 a.m. and you get there and it's a 5-minute wait. Modify it to a different time or completely modify to a different, if that's the only time you care to ride it that day, grab a different ride. Grab Soarin' for 10:30 instead and go walk on to Monsters, Inc. Because there's just no reason to.
And honestly, if you never go back to Monsters, Inc., you still walked on it with everybody else and you had the option.
Mm-hmm.
And if you use it, you don't have the option because you can only do, this is another rule we maybe didn't exactly go over. You can only ride each lightning lane ride once a day. So it used to be on Max Pass.
RIP Max Pass.
That you could ride the same ride multiple times a day as long as there were time slots available. Now it's you get one chance to ride Space Mountain and Matterhorn, and you get it once a day.
Which, Disney, if you're listening, please
Bring
change that. Because this is the thing. Some people don't want to ride Goofy Sky School or Incredicoaster, not you.
Not me.
Or Grizzly River Run. Or
me, 90% of the time.
What a downer. Or Millennium Falcon. Boo! So the thing is, there's people, and maybe they're relying on that anyway, that not everyone's riding everything, obviously. But I feel like the thing that brought me such joy with Max Pass is that if I wanted to circle Haunted Mansion, I could. And I could choose that was the thing that I was picking next on my schedule, and no one could stop me, and no one cared. Because I wasn't taking up a spot on Millennium Falcon instead, you know?
I don't necessarily see why it can't be that way. But, you know, I'm not in charge. They don't pay me the big bucks.
Anyone have Josh Tomorrow or Bob Iger's emails? That we
Ken
Potrock?
Ken Potrock.
You listening?
One last thing to go over is just logistically. If you have a park hopper, you can book lightning lanes for the opposite park when you're still in the current park you're in. So as long as the return time is after 11 a.m. So you have to have the ability to hop over and get on that ride before they'll let you schedule it.
Yeah.
So if you're over in DCA and you know you're going to hop over to Disneyland at 11:30 and you see Indiana Jones available for noon, you can grab that and plan to hop over there and get in that line. And also, to be clear, we had told you that you cannot start booking lightning lanes before you're scanned into the park. But once you've scanned in for the day, you can book lightning lanes when you've left the park. So if you've gone back for a break at your hotel or anything, you can still be booking things because you've been in the park and you've been actively using your lightning lane. You just can't do that first thing in the morning.
One last thing I thought of that we had talked about earlier today is sometimes you'll get to a ride and it's closed down and your return time has started or is about to start and the ride is closed. So when that happens, or if you see a notification come up on your phone that says something like, we've made changes to your lightning lane experience or something to that effect. What that is they've issued you a multi-experience pass, or if you get to the ride and it's closed, they will issue a multi-experience pass shortly.
Or if you were in the line, in your lightning lane, you already scanned in, but you didn't get to ride it, don't leave.
Because it closed down.
Yeah, so make sure that you don't just bail because the ride went down. Stay in your line and go to a cast member and make sure they issue you a multiple experience pass because it means that you can come back later.
So typically a multiple experience pass it's issued for rides of a same tier that you're on. So like if the ride that closed down was Midway Mania or Indiana Jones or a few of the Space Mountain, some of those kind of like higher popularity rides, you'll be issued a multi-experience pass that will essentially get you on almost anything in the park other than like Rise of the Resistance and Radiator Springs and a few things like that. If it's a lower tiered ride like Astro Blasters, for instance, then you'll get something with equivalent tier. Like I think it'll get you on Star Tours or it'll get you on, Small World or whatever. It's sort of like equivalent tiers. So when that happens, it just basically means you don't have to schedule anything. You just go use it when you want. So you can either come back to that ride later if you want to. Like if you really wanted to go on Monsters Inc. and it closed down, you can come back and use it on Monsters Inc. Or you can decide, we don't need Monsters Inc. And you can go immediately use it on Soarin', or I don't know if that is an equivalent one, but something else. So sometimes we'll save those multiple experience passes and use them later in the evening, or at times when we kind of are maybe having to take a 2-hour penalty on another ride, and it kind of fills a void of some kind. So anyway, you can hold multiples of those. If there's rides breaking down, just make sure that you're getting those if you're leaving a queue, or if you break down. If you're on a ride that breaks down, ask a cast member, say, can I get a multiple experience pass so I can do this ride again? And a lot of times they will issue those to you. Even if you don't have Genie Plus, they will often add those to your park ticket.
Yeah. Make sure that you get those for sure. There was something else I was going to say.
I was like, that was so enlightening. Thank you for adding that to my...
I was hoping that I would remember it as words came out of my mouth.
It was not to be.
It was important. Oh, here it is. It's back. On your multiple experience pass, there is a button you can click that says where can I go, or where can I use this? You can click on that and it will show you all the different ride choices. So sometimes it will even have things like Peter Pan or Mr. Toad's, things that don't normally have a lightning lane, but now you get to take it and use it on a Fantasyland. You go through the exit and they just let you hop on.
And that's lovely.
So that's kind of nice to use. So make sure to look at that list and see where you can go, because there may be something on there that is more valuable to you. So just know that that's where you can find out where your pass is valid.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to toot our own horns here, but I feel like this gave you a pretty comprehensive view of Genie Plus and what you can expect. And yeah, maybe we fumbled a couple times, but also this was amazing. And also it's not called Genie Plus. It's called Lightning Lane Multipass.
You're welcome. Remember, we will be back later this week next week, couple weeks, with a visual of this. We want to show it to you in action. We realize it can be really stressful. Feel free to message us, comment, let us know if you have any questions. We are here and happy to help. We have a website where we have all of these things written down if it's easier for you to read about it. And also always remember to subscribe, share these videos. We always appreciate your support, and it helps us to continue to give out all this kind of information to you on a regular basis. So thanks for being here.
One final thing. Our inbox is always open. We respond to literally everything. We're very friendly and not scary, and there's no stupid questions unless that question was in the caption of the reel that you're asking the question about. Then it's kind of stupid. Just read the caption. Just kidding. But
whoa, calling people out.
Sometimes, but actually the other thing that I was just going to say is if you haven't booked a trip yet and you want to, make sure you go through our link. It's in the show notes. It helps us be able to continue to bring this content as well. Our partners at Getaway Today will get you the best tickets deals as well as hotel deals. And each one of those tickets or hotels that are purchased through our link is credited to us as a sale that we made, and that is beneficial to our relationship with them as well as our ability to travel and bring this kind of stuff. So always book through that link.
Also, if you fill out a form after you have booked your trip on our website with your invoice number, we will, and your mailing address, will send you a free little straw pouch to make your vacation even more amazing.
You want that. Just like the lady on Napoleon Dynamite.
I want that. On that lovely note, thanks for being here. Have a good day.
Bye.